Okay, welcome. I believe we're live for the 29th edition of the Data Value Show. Today's theme is the value of a data evangelist. And I've got a great guest here that I'll bring onto the stage. Hey, Kemp, how are you doing?
Good. How are you, Chris?
I'm not too bad. So I always start with an intro of how the paths cross of the guest. And I think ours, we were discussing at Day-to-Day Texas, was back at the days of Sainsbury's, I believe. And I was just talking to Ian, my business partner, and we were remembering some of the conversations we had around, I think it was data vault modeling on Snowflake. But we've both been a long-term fan of yours. And I think you actually created the role of the evangelist as well. I don't know how many other people were around you that had that sort of title before you. So welcome to the show, Ken. So anyone doesn't know you, do you want a bit of an introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. So I've been in the industry for over 40 years. I got into data analytics, what we traditionally called data warehousing, back in the mid 90s, right shortly after Bill Inman started publishing his works. I actually got introduced to data warehousing I was a data analyst for the National Renewable Energy Lab, one of the U.S. government's national labs, which was based out in Golden, Colorado. Their data analyst came back from a conference in Vail with Bill Inman, and it's like, okay, we need to build a data warehouse. And I got to help build the first one there. So that got me introduced into it. And then I went on to work with Len Silverstone at his consultancy, and there I got introduced formally to Bill Inman. We co-authored a book together called the Data Model Resource Book. And I guess I'll say the rest, as they say, is history. Just went from there, from consulting and working for smaller organizations, and even running. I actually worked for Denver Public Schools for a while, for almost 6 years. I started their data warehousing program and built a team and did all of that for the public school. And then, of course, as you know, then in end of 2015, I joined Snowflake as an evangelist. And like you said, we met very early on when Snowflake first launched in Europe. One of our first customers there was Sainsbury's, which is I think it was the third largest grocery chain in Europe, if I remember correctly.
I think that's right, yep.
And the discussion, yes, rapidly became, how do we get you from Teradata to Snowflake? Somebody said, well, what about Data Vault? And the sales engineer there said, I know a guy. and brought me in. And that kind of started the Sainsbury's journey to moving to Snowflake and Data Vault and automation and all kinds of fun things. Yeah.
I do remember nerding out some conversations of the difference between hash keys, business keys, and surrogate keys, and how that fitted into the new world.
And the performance implications. There was a huge, massive debate over yes, our hash key is gonna ruin everything, and that started me on the journey with another buddy of mine, Keith Hoyle, who's still at Snowflake as a solution architect, in investigating. What does that mean? How does Snowflake perform? And it turned out, well, as you know, Snowflake rocks, right?
Yeah.
So it's slower, but it's so infinitesimally slower that it doesn't really matter, that the benefits from the methodology and the whole reason we did hash keys in Data Vault far surpassed the performance impact of doing the join on the hash keys.
No, it was one of the in a sad old life I live in. It was one of the greatest sort of like bit of debates and research we did. I've had some other ones as well, but that was up there, and one that we always talk about as well. But that's just how sad I am sometimes. But the title of the show today is the role of the data evangelist, and we had the pleasure of attending Day-to-Day Texas, where we were both attending some of the same events, but also getting a chance to catch up pre and post the event as well. And I was really interested to hear the role of the evangelist. I get called influencers. What's the difference between them, and when's an organization need one? And again, I hadn't seen that. I think your title at Snowflake at the beginning of the journey, and obviously the benefits that came from that role for the organization of getting that product out there and the momentum that Snowflake has achieved. So the key question is, okay, what's the role of a data evangelist?
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know what it's supposed to be. I know what I did. Like I said, I made it up because like when I got got interviewing with them, they actually asked me what I wanted the title to be, and I came up with the technical evangelist is what I ended up calling it. It's that's what it went from senior technical evangelist eventually to chief technical evangelist, and the goal was just to honestly was to wake people up and say, because this was Snowflake had just come out of stealth, right? They'd gotten their first public version released probably about 4 months before I joined the company. And it was a combination of, well, how do we articulate the value of this new platform? And what that ended up turning into, it was really the discussion of the architecture, right? It's like, what is it that these guys have done in the cloud that is so radically different? And that's where it became more, to a certain extent, there was a theoretical conversation, but it was also an educational conversation because so many people, I came out of the Oracle world. I was an Oracle ace, and then one of the first Oracle aces in the early 2000s, and then an Oracle ace director, which for those who don't know, that doesn't mean I worked for Oracle. That means basically I was a community evangelist, and I went to a lot of Oracle user groups. I wrote a lot of papers. I wrote a lot of blogs explaining how to use the Oracle products. So I had that background, and actually all the way back to the early 90s, I'll tell you where the term came from, is in 1992, I went to work for a company called Apogee Open Systems based in Denver. And it was a oil and gas software startup company that was going to build software on the Oracle platform. And Rick Williams, who had been the president of the Rocky Mountain Oracle User Group, I think he was actually the founding president, he recruited me to go work for them. And, I was employee number 5. So I actually did have another startup before Snowflake. And he taught us, he actually told us multiple times, he's like, I'm going to train you to be an evangelist. We're like, wait, what? So this was in 1992 that he had used this term evangelist, though we never used that term really publicly. So all of us that were part of the product development team, we were using Oracle Case, which I'm sure you remember that, Chris, right? And, he said, we're going to teach people how to use that product. And the software we're building will just be the example of how you can go about doing it. And that's going to be the evidence. Right. So it's evidence-based. So long before we had social media and you talk about social evidence as your qualifications, like we're going to go to user group meetings and we're going to show people step by step how we use this Oracle Case product in order to build world-class software, 100% generation. So we were into auto generation. So this is 10 years before the Agile movement even hit software development. So we're doing that in data. And he said, we're going to train you to be an evangelist. And that stuck with me throughout my career. So when I got to Snowflake, it's like, I think I want to call this an evangelist position, because it's not marketing, right? And there's that's part of the difference. Is like there's a difference between product marketing and product and data evangelism. And the way I saw it was, my role was to explain, in this case, a lot of my audience, I had a huge audience in the Oracle world. What's the difference? What did Benoit and Thierry do in building Snowflake that was so different and is going to make it a better solution than the traditional approach to doing data warehousing in Oracle? And so that was a lot of education. So I was out there trying to educate people, which of course meant I had to be educated myself, right? Sitting down with the engineers and the founders, it's like, okay, explain this architecture to me. Don't tell me what's on the website. Like, now I can read that. Show me, explain to me a little more. How does this work and why it's so innovative? And then I can go and try to translate that into terms that, the DBAs of the world and the data architects of the world can understand.
So, I remember the beginning days, and I think a good friend of mine, he described Snowflake as snake oil. It just sounds too good to be true. And I remember seeing the white paper that had been released, and for my first experience when I delivery when it went in there as well, which was I think one of the first EU customers, and it's very hard to explain why Snowflake was able to achieve what we've been trying to achieve with Oracle, Netezza, Teradata, all of those years. And I think the other thing I saw is such emotional attachment to the product. The SQL Server guys would be how great there was compared to Oracle. The Oracle would say that their Exadata is more superior to Teradata. There was very much and it was all semantics of the differences. And I think the role I saw you play and that gap was being able to relate to all of the technical people, to say, look, this is how we've achieved it, to get that belief from that side, but then also to go marketing, right, this is how you sell this to the C-suite audience. So
right.
do you see that as like the core? You're that translator from an architectural or from a business use case.
Right. Yeah. So it gets back to, as you and I, we had this discussion a lot. Everybody was talking about this in day-to-day Texas, right? Is the business value is, okay, this is in this case, it's a completely new technology. And you can get down to the technical nitty gritty with the really experienced DBAs and say, okay, this is how your database works. This is how Snowflake works. And because Snowflake is architected this way, that means we can do these 10 things that you can't do over here. And, eventually, and obviously we were able to demonstrate it because that's what sold me. It's like when I saw it in action, it's like, wow, it is rocket science at this point. You're going, wow, this is what I've been waiting for in the Oracle world for 3 decades, right? Everything the promise was there. And they're like, well, here's the fulfillment, but it's over here in Snowflake. And as Benoit and Thierry articulated many times, it required a completely different architecture to actually achieve those goals. Couldn't be done with the old technology. So you could get that, but then it was, okay, so then there's the so what, right? There's the technical aspect of, wow, this is really cool. We're able to achieve all these things. But the so what question, which is the business question, is like, how do you pitch that, like you said, to the C-suite, whether it's CIO, CTO, or even CEO and CFO? Why should we drop our 20 plus year relationship with our current vendor for this startup in the cloud? Right. And that was fun, right? Being able to do that and put that together is like, and learning to articulate, take those technical reasons, the technical features, and tie them to business value. Again, it's the so what question. It's like, okay, so I can auto scale to, with multi-cluster warehouse, I can auto scale to 10 parallel streams of up to X number of CPUs. So what? Well, that means that if you get a sudden onslaught, say on Black Friday, and you're a retailer with a website, it's not going to crash. You're going to be able to process all of that, but you don't have to have this massive server and have to upgrade your hardware just to handle Black Friday. You can scale up on Black Friday, and then when it's done, it scales back down. So you just have this utilization cost, and that whole model, the consumption model, like your utility company, you turn the lights on, the electricity, the little needle spins, and you pay for that. You turn the lights off, it stops. And Snowflake working the same way. So not only did we have a technological difference, we had an economic difference on how is this going to work. And that, of course, is another business conversation. It's like, we're going from CapEx to OpEx. Right. And what does that mean to an organization? So the guy with the $50 million budget for hardware goes, but I've got this budget. What if I don't spend it all this year? Right? And that conversation becomes very interesting.
And I'll go probably slightly on, but it's slightly off a tangent, but it's a really good point, and the CapEx versus OpEx. So some things I saw as the negative aspect of that is there was no control of the spend that was there. So people just spun up stuff and it got out of control. I think the joke I made is, they forgot the cloud fairy wasn't paying the bill. Someone had to go and actually put some money in their pocket to
right. Yeah. And the craziest part was the, Snowflake's auto suspend feature. It's like when you created a virtual warehouse, the default was auto suspend was on, and if it wasn't used after X number of minutes, it turned off. And people were going in and turning that off. They were like turning it off, and then of course then it ran, and that's when they got that massive bill because somebody turned it off on Friday afternoon, ran a process that they thought, well, surely this is it took I don't know, we'll say it took 10 days on Teradata to run. It's going to take at least 2 days on Snowflake. So they just turned auto suspend off, not understanding that auto suspend isn't going to automatically turn on in 10 minutes. It's going to suspend when there's 10 minutes of inactivity. So they didn't understand the concept. And so they put it in expecting it's going to run at least 2 days through the weekend, and then they can turn it off on Monday. And they come in on Monday and it's like, okay, they started at 6 o'clock on Friday. It was actually done at 8. It only ran for 2 hours, but they left the dang thing on for now 48 plus hours and got this massive bill. And, and that was a learning curve for all of us, really. I mean, that happened many times. And, and then of course the people with the checkbook are going, what are you people doing over there?
And it's not, I mean, we're highlighting Snowflake, but it was a common cloud issue of everyone moving the stuff out, having EC2 computes out there the whole time doing stuff, or wrong size ones, or multiple environments that are up at the same time, so it was back to the issue. Well, I suppose the benefits that came from was we started to innovate quicker. That may have come at a cost, and there's been some benefit or some winners out of that, and some losers. But I want to before we move on to the next one, which is that skills. I think I want to talk about when Snowflake came up, and I suppose this is about any product evangelism that's out there. It's the products that have gone and reinvent or started from scratch and said, okay, if I was to design this stuff now, what would I do? And that ability to I use the typewriter example. We all use the type. The keys are all set up as they are. They're not set up that for the best way for us to operate as humans. They're actually best set up because old typewriters, if the keys were too close together, they used to jam. So using that probably into the Oracle sort of analogy of what they were doing Exadators, they had to have constraints on there because of the hardware or limitations or data centers that lived at that point in time. And obviously we and Snowflake was able to go, right, fresh piece of paper. How would I do this? And that's, I think that's where true innovation really starts. But it's there's been many losers in that game as there are winners. It's tough to start from scratch and get a product from a vision to reality. So I'll move on to the next one, the skills, and I'd be interested to hear what skills you think you've leveraged. And I think with everyone wants a fast track to get to the role title now. Is you can't. Can you teach evangelism? Can you teach someone to be an evangelist, or is it collection of skills that then can be reused and become evangelists?
Well, I think it's I'm a classic consultant. It's a yes or a no, right? It could be, but it depends, as always. From my background, obviously, I had two things going in parallel. I think one was, I started off as a coder, right? And I eventually got into data and learned SQL and learned data warehousing and all these principles and methodologies and all that. And I had several decades of experience when I came to Snowflake. As you know, there's some of that you can't teach, right? It's really hard to shortcut those experiences. As we say, we've got the arrows in the back and the T-shirt to prove it, right?
Scars.
The scars. So we've seen, and we've been through several cycles in the industry of seeing things that, the new bright shiny object that's supposed to save the world and is going to be a paradigm shifter that turned out was just a big bottleneck and a problem. So we have a certain amount of experienced skepticism. So I think that to a certain extent that helps, because that allows you to then question these new things and say, okay, let's dig in really, right? And so some of that I learned, from being involved with the Boulder BI Brain Trust with Claudia Imhoff and hanging out with analysts that asked hard questions to vendors. So before I ever worked for a vendor, I was in a position of always asking hard questions to vendors. As a trained evangelist back in my early Oracle days, that was something we did. We were always asking questions about the Oracle software. They said Oracle case can do this. And we went, it's like, well, okay, not really. And then we weren't afraid to say, yeah, that's what you're trying to achieve, but here's what you really have to do to make it happen. And so there's a certain amount of, I guess, the street savvy that you learned from that experience, that you just didn't take things at face value. You learned that, okay, it may have sounded really good. And the question was, how close was it to the picture, right? So that's your product marketing versus reality, right? And being able to traverse that carefully. We didn't want to offend, even though I never worked for Oracle. We didn't want to really offend Oracle, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure the product evolved. And so we got into giving feedback and, constructive criticism, as we used to call it. So having those skills, but then another piece of it, which is something that hadn't dawned on me till, I was well into my Snowflake career, and someone said something. It's like, how do you do that? Why you seem very comfortable on stage? You seem very comfortable speaking. Where did that come from? Because you're technical, and most technical people can't do that. And it went back to, you're going to love this, was acting. I started in theater in 7th grade. I was in plays, and in high school, I even got into musical theater, because I sang and actually play the violin, not as much anymore. So I had a fairly musical family. My brother's actually a music teacher now. And it eventually dawned on me, it's like, why is that? And why is it I don't feel like I need a microphone, that I can project my voice? And so, well, that was my drama teacher in high school. We didn't have microphones. And he'd stand all the way in the back. He'd stand in the dead spot in the auditorium. And we had to be able to project so that he could tell what we were saying and what we meant. So, of course, I'm also Italian, so the hands kind of just go with that, speaking with my hands all the time. So that experience of performance, so whether it's, you happen to have a background in theater or drama, if not, then you've got to do something like, Toastmasters International, right? You've got to have the public speaking, but you also have to have, and I see Scott Taylor is on here, the Data Whisperer, and he's very much into storytelling, and he does it with his puppets and in a very humorous way, and we all love that. So you've got to be able to tell a story and tell it in a way that's going to be engaging, but for me, I found it was very easy for me to do, because I had all that experience. Because I had a couple of decades. I had a lot of, just like you, Chris, I had a lot of stories. And the question is what are the lessons that we learned from those stories? And especially in working with Snowflake and being on the stage, that's how I was able to relate to a lot of the audiences, is because I have the same experiences that they had. And I can say, you remember when have you ever had a database that did this? And everybody's looking, oh my gosh. Oh yeah. It's like, okay, well, here's how Snowflake solved that problem. Right. And so it gets their attention, keeps them engaged. And so that combination of storytelling, acting, and having the experience and technical acumen to relate all these things together.
Yeah, and I think I've just been making some notes as you were going through there, and I think some of this resonates with Jesse's presentation about soft skills. And there was actually a new one, you just added there is, we think about soft skills of being able to talk to the business and be able to communicate, and then translate that to technical talk to your technical team. But I think you've just added another dimension to that as well, is the ability to present to a large audience, but also read the crowd. because if you can, you'll get a sense for maybe the some of the people in the audience, maybe you're getting feedback from them, or understanding maybe demographics, age group, and the presentation. Okay, I know these people will have a background from data warehousing or from Hadoop, and you can judge or make sure you're actually covering both sides as well.
Or data scientists. I did a number of things talking to folks that were, there's a couple data scientists in the room and having to learn their language.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What is it when a data scientist talks about a model? It's not an ERD like we're talking about, and having to learn that and learn the lingo. I had to learn the lingo for graph and what people talk about graph, and figure out the parallels with what I knew and what they know, and try to bring that all together.
Yeah, it's like one business data dictionary of 3-letter acronyms that you can able to translate them and actually make sure that you don't lose certain people on the audience by being able to give things that they can actually relate to. And the other note I mentioned there, which is another, when thinking of this evangelist role originally, I was thinking of very much outward facing. And I think the other key thing you mentioned there is there's an inward facing aspect as well. So this is not just evangelism to the audience, it's that feedback and challenging to your product team internally. And I like the term of how you mess up, how you tell someone the baby's ugly, and there's an emotional attachment to software. It is their baby. So you have to make sure that you said it earlier, the constructive criticism, and it's being able to deliver that, and also that credibility factor, because when we've all been in a situation where someone thinks they know everything, and you don't know what you're talking about. If you're able to, you've got that background, that history. Okay, I'm going to listen to them. They've got presidents or provenance. I think it is the one. You can trace back. Okay, well, they've done these things. I should give them a chance. Not saying you shouldn't elsewhere. Everyone should be given a chance, but sometimes that background fast tracks that, I think.
Right. Well, and especially when you're delving into something innovative and new, there is the question of why should we believe you, right?
Yep.
Why should we believe you? And one of the things I think, my background in, the presentations and blogging and things that I had done, it got to a point of where people like that sales engineer at Sainsbury's and others would actually request to have me come in and explain it to them.
Yep.
Because they'd seen me do a presentation at Oracle Open World 10 years ago about Data Vault, right? And it was something new and innovative then. It's like, well, I want to hear Kent's take on the and
it's
that
credibility factor.
Yeah, as they know, as the kids call it now, street cred, right?
Surviving the mean data streets, as
mean
I like
data
to
streets.
say.
That's right. Got to have some street cred. It's because I've had a number of people, especially since I've quasi retired from Snowflake, who've reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I'm looking at your career, and I'm just like, how did you get there? How did you end up doing this?" Evangelist role. And like you said, I haven't seen nobody at Snowflake today carries that title. There's some great DevRel people, developer relations people, who are awesome, that do the demos and are very technical and learning all the new things that Snowflake does. Then there's my friend Jennifer Belisant, who's a data strategist is the title they give her, and so she talks more on the business value side. But yeah, there's not a lot out there in the industry. I think the origin, once I got into it and looked around a little bit, there is some evangelist lists and groups.
Sonny Riviera has that role at ThoughtSpot. I think our good friend Serge, obviously at SQL DBM, carries that one as well.
I think Sonny Rivera, at ThoughtSpot,
See, and it's interesting, as you were just saying that, and with any organization, you're always looking for the unicorn, the one that can do everything. And we all realize at some point, we no one person can cover all of those things at the level you need at some stage, you know, and as you're growing as a company, you need to level up at a certain point. So it was interesting you mentioned that, you know, that role doesn't exist there, and you know, I think because it's just too big for one person now, you know, so you couldn't have that one title, and you know, maybe it does fall into the CMO or the sales organization because it's grown so big. So that role's been split out. It'd be interesting to say, okay, so what parts of your old job lived within that one side, which I think you alluded to by the title, really, of each of them, and which how is it split up?
Yeah. So, for most of my time at Snowflake, I reported up into the marketing department, and the guy who originally hired me, John, he was the VP of product and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It was before we hired Christian, and we didn't have a head of product management, and before Denise came in and as the chief marketing officer, it was just the one guy, right? Mm-hmm. And he had one field marketing person who organized what little things we did, and somebody who organized webinars. And there was like 3 people in the department. So that's where I started out. And for a while, then I moved out when I got into the strategic advisor role. So it was a period of time where I was a evangelist and strategic advisor. That ended up was the department that eventually turned into Snowflake Professional Services and Education.
Yep. Yep.
Right. And that was under, let's see, what was Rick? I'm trying to remember what he was. He reported to Bob Moglia. He reported to the CEO, but he wasn't marketing. He was operations. And that's where that whole group started. And so eventually I think that ended up under sales. But the roles, you know, regardless of where the reporting relationship was, because there was, you know, when Frank came in, there was about 2 weeks that I actually reported directly to Frank Slootman, which was fun and terrifying at the same time.
Yes.
I like Frank a lot. He was great to work for and with, because, you know, you could just talk to him straight and say, okay, this is what I do. This is how I do it. This is what I think we need to keep doing. And the question is, do you agree? And the answer was yes. Yeah, you need to keep doing what you're doing. And then there was this discussion versus sales versus marketing, and Denise won, right? So back over into the sales, into the marketing team. But part of what I did, I think, as a strategic advisor, and when you met me, a lot of that was more towards the sales side. I was part of the sale. I became part of the sales cycle in many cases. I was the guy that they brought in to basically answer the objections of the experienced people at the customer. You know, that, you know, it's beyond the sales engineer doing a demo and answering some of the objections. And they say, okay, well, let's have Kent come in.
Wheel out the Kent, they called
it. but then we also started talking, it was architecture. It wasn't just Snowflake. It's like, what does this environment look like? What we now call the data cloud, but what does the environment look like? What's the data architecture? You know, talking about ETL versus ELT, and what kind of reporting tools are you going to use, and what kind of design paradigm are you going to use? And of course, you know, I'm a data vault evangelist as well. You know, as unofficial but ongoing for decades now. And so combining those two together to come in and really help create the vision for a customer of how are we going to apply this new technology? Great. We got all these great features of Snowflake, but, you know, how do we go about implementing it, and how do we apply it, and how do we get to success with our adoption of the platform? And so, yeah, that really falls kind of more on the sales side. And there was a certain aspect, the folks that I work with today. So like with data ops and SQL DBM and Coalesce. Though Coalesce didn't exist while I was at Snowflake, they came out of stealth afterwards. But I knew them in their prior incarnation. The guys there, Armand and Satish, worked at another company that I had brought into the Snowflake Partner Network. And so because of my background, the partner team often called on me to help them vet some of the new technical partners and say, you know, does this make sense? Is this something Snowflake needs? Is it something Snowflake should support? So I even ended up in the partner side of the house a little bit as well. And that's where I met, you know, Justin and Guy, really, with the conversation. And, you know, when they were at Datalytics and they were SIs in in England, in London there, and eventually having those conversations about, well, what do Snowflake customers need?
Yep.
And that led to a lot of very interesting conversations.
Yeah, it's quite funny. The three companies, slight plug, obviously, we partner with all the ones. So I suppose it leads on to the other point of when well, from internally, when we partner with people and the the criteria that makes it worth our while and backs that credibility, we partner with vendors that we believe are making the right advances and providing the ultimate value for our clients. And one of the topics held there was product evangelism versus solution evangelism. And I'll be interested to see, if people are saying, can you just go and buy evangelism for you? And then it's how that's achievable. And, we're not just guns for hire. We're people that we believe in what we're working with and on aims our credibility. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, I don't have any problem balancing it personally, but I'm sure there's a lot of vendors that would like to hire somebody who are, I'll say, pure product evangelists, which is really just one step, I'll say, beyond product marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's really just pushing the product. But as always, I've never believed that, a product just for the sake of the product. It could be the coolest product on the planet, but does it solve a problem? And when you start talking about solving problems, you've immediately moved into the solution evangelism conversation. Yep. So as you know, like I said, the data vault methodology and approach is something I've promoted for years. But in reality, if we want to back it down, it's traditional data governance best practices, data warehousing best practices, back to the principles that Bill Inman originally wrote about. Why are we doing this data warehousing thing? What are we trying to achieve? And asking those questions in light of the product that you're dealing with is, how can this product help solve the problem? And what's the approach we need to take to use this product effectively, right? So it is really blending the two together. So to avoid the bright, shiny object syndrome, right? Yep. Yeah, great. I can say, product evangelism is look at the new bright, shiny object. Solution evangelism is, but you gotta have a good approach, right? Yep. Right. So you're not, I guess we said, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Yeah.
I did a post on the weekend, and it was in thinking ahead of this, the call today or the show today. And I think the post says the bigger picture thinking. I think I said, give me a problem, I'll find a solution. Give me a tool, I'll work out how to use it. I think Ramona gave us a slight addition to it. Give me a strategy, I'll work out how to actually use the right tool for having the right solution. Give me a North Star, give me a mission. I can tell you which of the strategies can actually achieve that end objective. And I do see that's like the role of the evangelist. It is to help guide people to think bigger than just a tool, think bigger than just one solution. And I think someone else did this, is a data strategy without a business strategy is useless as well. So you can have the best data strategy in the world, but if you haven't got the business buy-in. So again, evangelism of making sure that your end goal is the mission, and your evangelist should be helping support you achieve that.
Right. And I think, back to one of your earlier questions, can you train someone to be an evangelist? And I think the only way you can is these kinds of conversations. Yep. I mean, it's going to have to be mentoring. It's going to have to be, getting them on stage or getting them on a webinar, or getting them on a podcast, and doing the critical evaluation of their performance. But step one is getting them to realize it's, to a certain extent, it is a performance. Yeah. Right. Not that you're making stuff up, but it's got to be, storytelling. It's got to be engaging. If you are going to part of the role of an evangelist is purely to get people excited about whatever it is that you're discussing, right? To feel that passion. And in part, though, you have to have the passion yourself, That's one of those things. If you can fake it well enough in our world, then okay, you probably should be an actor and going for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
Because if you can fake your excitement about data and analytics and hardware and methodologies, that's you're probably a pretty darn good actor.
And there's a couple of things. I think Jesse's again his presentation. There is no 10-week boot camp you can go on. That at the end of it, you're going to become an evangelist. But I think you're right. I think providing the guidance of what or how you've achieved it, how others have achieved it, can help people on that journey. I got a question I'm going to bring up from Paul Sargent, and I think it's quite well. We got to in fact, maybe a shout out to a lot of people. Say, hey, Scott is on the show, Val tuning in, JT, Keeley, and I know that I think Ramona's on there as well. So yeah, shout out to all the audience. But yeah, so there's an interesting question here is, given the focus on products, contracts, self-serve analytics, and all the rest of it, do you think the evangelist role is becoming even more essential?
Some form of it, yeah, that's probably a good point, because you start talking about data products and contracts, all that rolls into data mesh and methodology. So I think we're getting into the solution evangelist conversation of, if you're going to do these things, how are you going to go about doing them? And again, don't make data products just because you think you need to make data products. Why do you think you need a data product? Who are the customers? What does the data product even look like, right? And the data contracts and self-service, these are all great concepts, but you've got to get people thinking about it more critically. And it's something, it was a pet peeve of Claudia's always, was the lack of critical thinking out there these days, is that people just accepting, oh, well, we're going to do data products, right? And that tool is a data product tool, so we should just grab it and use it. Well, we did that with Hadoop, right? It's like, yes, we need, everybody's got to have a data lake. Okay, so what are you going to do with that data lake? I don't know. We're going to collect data.
And I think it goes down to the autonomy you've given and to the teams, but also the vision you've given to teams as well. If you haven't given them a clear direction of where they're going, and you've dived into this technology first approach of, the solutions or the requirements will find themselves, or the use cases will find our platform. No, you can't. And I think there's many roles. You could call this as an architect, an internal architect role, or it could be a data product owner that's owning a platform. It's if we boil it down to the key skills that are needed, it's some damn good soft skills, some good battle scars that people have had before with real life experiences, a broad spectrum, or be able to see it from different viewpoints. That and you can't get that unless you stay on the journey for a while. But
right, and I think that's true. It's not a role you can jump now. Like developer relations. You can more easily jump into that if you're technically very savvy and you love the coding and the environment. Whatever the product is, you can get in and you can become an expert on that product and find and come up with really innovative ways to utilize a particular product and work with the community and provide feedback. I did that for years on the Oracle Technology Network forums, answering questions about Oracle Designer. And that really hones your knowledge. And one of the things that learned over the years, of course, is that by teaching something, you learn it better, right? You've never had to know something so well as when you start to teach it, because you're going to get questions that you may not have thought of yourself, and then you have to actually go into another learning mode. You may not know the answer, and so that was being a developer relations person in particular, great way to learn a product is, get pretty good at it, and then get into kind of a DevRel role and get in an online community, whether it's a Slack community or Reddit or one of the others out there and interact with the community, look at the questions. One of the things I did early on that I'll say kind of helped progress my career, other than all the Oracle user group stuff, was LinkedIn discussion forums used to be a big thing, right? And there was a bunch of data warehousing ones, and I'd go and read the questions, and sometimes it was like, wow, I'd never even thought of that, and then read the answers and see who's answering, right? Figure who's answering, who seems to know what they're talking about, and then eventually I started answering those questions, and that was, I'll say, part of my acquiring my street cred. I know I got one job specifically off of LinkedIn where somebody who didn't know me had been watching me on one of the LinkedIn data warehousing forums for apparently months, and decided that based on my answers that she wanted me to work for her, and sent me a thing and said, hey, would you be interested in interviewing for something? That did it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think what LinkedIn provided me, and we're up to, was it, the 29, got 30 shows, and only reason I can be able to speak this because of the collaboration I've made on LinkedIn, making good friends and like-minded people. And I think that's another thing that you can't fast track as well. I think network. Network, and it was being challenged. And I learned from these conversations, as well as I hope help shed light on things to other people as well. But I think I always use it, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And LinkedIn, that community, provides you the ability to always find another room for a chat. You can always be challenged, and as long as you've got the right mindset of listening to other people as well, which I've learned to get better at. But is that feedback and challenging your historical views on things, but also to highlight when we've solved this problem before. Let's not reinvent the wheel, which we do have a habit of. So the question, not all well, we can go on other things as well, but one of the topics is I suppose the future of data evangelists versus data influencers. And I think I'll probably spin that a little bit, is what the difference of the two is as well. And maybe that's the place to start. So where do you see the difference of a data influencer, a data evangelist? Is there an overlap? Is there some core differences that you'd call out?
I'd have to say I'm not really sure what a data influencer is. I mean, I know it's the whole social media thing. Yeah, is that unfortunately, in many cases, when you're dealing with at the influencer level, the level of information is very shallow. Right. So that may be good to draw attention to something, but when somebody wants to dig deep, the content's not there. Right. And so I think that, there's probably, from I'll say a pure marketing perspective, an influencer obviously is helpful in bringing attention to something that you might otherwise have missed. But then, how effective is it on, if we're going to talk from a vendor perspective, conversion, right? It's, as an evangelist, part of what you're trying to do really is to convert somebody from one way of thinking to another way of thinking, or in, the case of what we've been talking about, from, a legacy vendor to a new vendor, and getting people to change, on a solution evangelist position, you're looking at changing their existing methodology to a new methodology. So whatever that is, and influencer is not going to get you very far, right? It's going to be, okay, great, this looks good. Now what's my next step? Well, how do I make that happen? And without that depth of knowledge and this critical thinking approach, you're not going to get the conversion's not going to stick, right? They might get interested for a little while, but then they're going to drift off onto the next shiny object.
I think it's that difference between sort of like an SDR approach of just going and getting that message out there, but then the next level is you need someone that's going to be able to dive into any of those details afterwards. So so I think there's there's a need for both. But maybe that influence is a path to become an evangelist. So maybe that's or another way of gaining additional skills that can help with doing evangelism. But yeah, I think you're right. That's the difference. Is one's just that marketing aspect, get it out there, and it may not have much of the credibility aspect. But the next one is evangelist that is providing that credibility from real life stories. And anyone can go to Chat GPT or Bard or Genesis. I think it's been renamed as today or something like that. And you can go and create a lot of content. But if you ask another question or about it, we're just going to do and ask Chat GPT to expand on each of them. So and if you haven't got that real experience of I've seen it, I've done it, this is why it failed, this is why it worked, these are the consequences of doing it. Have you considered these things? I think that's true evangelism.
Yeah, I would say so. Yes.
So let's try it. We've pretty much covered our the 5 points, but I'm going to look at Scott Taylor was calling out the tie dye, so he was very
so you can see it says imagine all the data.
Yeah, exactly.
So shout out to Steve Hoberman. This was a T-shirt from Data Modeling Zone back. I was trying to remember, it's like 2018 or 2019, definitely pre-COVID. But yes.
And it's predated hallucinations from LLMs as well. So
right, yeah, there was no Chat GPT hallucinations at the time.
So it was ahead of its time. I think there's we may pick up on the LLMs. I'm just going to just put another one. I think this was for name doesn't come up as Caribbean. So I think it mentioned about mentoring. Yeah, and again, I keep calling out Jesse Anderson. He's on the show, I think, in a few weeks' time. But something he called out is that community giving back. And I think one of the other things we may have not mentioned of the evangelist, I think the evangelist role is to provide that mentoring, is to provide leverage our experience to mentor the next generation of data professionals. And if we can't help the next generation make our industry better, then we're not. Yeah, we were just in it for ourselves, and we had no passion in what we do. I think that's the other critical thing about being an evangelist is having passion.
Yes.
You got to love what you're talking about, because I think I've said this before in posts about people coming in interviews. You can't hide passion. You can't. We can't fake it. Well, maybe you're a good actor, but maybe then they'd be good as a good speaker. Then but yeah, you got to have that passion for what you're talking about, I believe.
Yeah, and I think that's I had good mentors. Rick Williams, who trained us to think like evangelists in our approach to doing our presentations for the user groups and the like. And then Claudia Imhoff has been. She's been my go-to person since pretty much I met her in the mid-90s. Anytime I had any career conversations that I needed to have of what could I do. So, before I went to Snowflake, I talked to her. At one point, my blog was Oracle Data Warrior. And one point she said, you take the Oracle part off because what you talk about goes way beyond that technology. And so it became the Data Warrior. And then, before I went to Snowflake, I actually, got to chat with her about that when I was in the interview process with Snowflake. And then when I got ready to retire from Snowflake and, over the years had conversations, there's like, what do I do? What's the, what's the next step? How do I become an advisor and kind of, a part-time consultant? What does that look like? How do I, if I'm going to be a speaker, somebody wants me to be a keynote speaker at an event, how do I handle that? Yep. And she was always very, very generous with her time and her advice to me. So years ago, somewhere on my blog, I wrote an article about, how do you stay ahead in the industry? And, number one was, staying educated, keeping up to date on the new things that are coming out. But it was, finding the right people to follow, right? Yep. At the time when I wrote it, it was, it was a lot of blogs. People had blogs. We hadn't gotten to all these, vlogs as they used to be called, now live stream video podcasts and things like that. But, finding the people in the community that you respect and you look up to to follow what they're writing about. And that's kind of your key. If you get some of the thought leaders, like I said, I always have followed, Bill Inman and Dan Lindstedt and Claudia Imhoff, those are always keys to, okay, what's really happening in the industry, because they're usually just a little bit ahead of the curve. And so, being able to watch things like that, to keep up to date. And then one of my other points was be involved in the community.
Yep.
Right. Whether it's attend events, now we're into meetups, right? And you have your what do you call yours? Your
low key meetup in
low key
London,
meetups. Yeah. And there's a lot of meetups. I did quite a few of those, even working at Snowflake. I ended up speaking at meetups and getting to meet people that way. But attending the meetups in your area, in areas that you're interested in learning more about, so you meet other people, again, like you said, Chris, like-minded people that have a passion about whatever that particular topic is, and finding out who they are and connecting with them. And tell people, my career in the Oracle space was greatly enhanced by the personal relationships that I made in the Oracle user groups, attending the local user group meetings and the national user group meetings and the international user group meetings, and becoming friends. Because before we had all this social media, all we had was email. And I had people that, I was not an Oracle DBA, but I knew the top Oracle DBAs in the world. And if I had a problem at a client or organization I was working at that I didn't know how to solve, and I could get help from Oracle support, I'd send them an email, and 9 times out of 10, within an hour, depending on time zones, I would get a reply back that was very, very helpful. And that allowed me to be productive and successful in my career. And, you don't get that through just necessarily following somebody on Facebook or Twitter, or I guess X now, or LinkedIn. Is you have to interact with them. And as you know, it's like meeting them in person is way better.
And the interesting point is, all those people you reached out to, I'm sure they'd reached out to you or had discussions. So there was that community. You've helped me, I've helped you, and it's I like to use serendipity and synchronicity. It's like you do things that you don't know why you're doing them, and it's part of that community. And also, I think the other thought I had was, these meetups, meeting like-minded people, it doesn't feel like work sometimes because you're just chatting, and that creates other opportunities for you. So, and I think that's definitely a path of becoming an evangelist. The more you talk to, the more exposure you get to different environments, technologies, industries. The more you're going to be successful as a sort of evangelist at some point.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we if I brought another topic up, we'd carry on going. I was going to talk about maybe some Taekwondo training as well, but I'll probably just try to wrap up. So anyone wants to get hold of you, I suppose the standard one's LinkedIn, but if there's any events you're attending or anyone you call out, anything you want to call out?
Let's see. Next thing coming up is the Worldwide Data Vault Consortium in Stowe, Vermont. First week of May, last days of April and beginning of May, is www.dvc.com. I'm actually going to be giving at least one talk there, and leading a panel discussion about data governance in the AI world and the need for data governance. So similar conversations to what we keep having.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting topic. So
I may be at Snowflake Summit. Not sure yet as to what's going on there, but I know some of my clients are definitely going to be there. So SQL DBM and Coalesce and DataOps.live. So just a matter of whether or not they need my services.
Yeah, well, I may see. I'm a jury's out for me. I'm not too sure if I'm there yet, but I probably will. But we'll see. And I think I just need a shout out. Probably for next week, we've got Jess Haberman on the show. Anyone that doesn't know her, she was worked at O'Reilly's. That was took the chance on Joe and Matt when she signed up their data engineering book, and obviously that was a good success. So we'll be sharing the value of knowledge sharing, which really links onto this evangelism conversation we've had today, which I know she's big in the dev relationship world as well. And anyone that hasn't seen any posts about it, Skid is happening. I think we're down to the last single-digit places now, so it's nearly full. But yeah, so I'll put a link on the post to say where that is as well. So anyone around the Swiss area that still wants to come, get in quick. But Kent, thank you very much for being on the show. We could have chatted for ages. Always enjoy our conversations, and always learning from you as well. So thank you very much for the show, and hope to see everyone next week on the next show. Okay, we'll call it a wrap.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.